Action figures in play!
Welcome to the newest edition of T&I News with your host, JC. Hey all you action figure enthusiasts out there, JC here, and for today's video we're doing something a little bit different. I was able to sit down with Bill Murphy from Fresh Monkey Fiction and do an interview with him, so that's what today's video is going to be all about. So I hope you enjoy it. We're going to be talking about things like Operation Monster Force and Cops and several of their other action figure lines. So again, I hope you enjoy this interview. All right, Bill, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us today. It is much appreciated. We got to talk a little bit at Joe Fest a couple of weeks ago, but I thought, it would just be really cool to bring you on the channel here and talk about Fresh Monkey Fiction and what you got coming and just things like that. So really do appreciate you coming on here today.
Awesome, man. Yeah, happy to hop on and chat. Yeah, thanks for coming by the booth at Joe Fest. It was a great show, and I'm glad we got a little bit of time to talk in person.
So I kind of, for those who maybe aren't super familiar with you, and you don't really do a lot of interviews, or at least you haven't up until this point, so I'm not sure, like Fresh Monkey Fiction is probably known more than you yourself. Maybe just give a little bit of background on yourself. How did you get into the toy making business? I read a little bit of your bio on the Fresh Monkey Fiction website, and it seemed to suggest that you come from a bit of a Hollywood background, working on movies.
Yeah, so my background for most of my career has been working in visual effects on movies, and then I had a career over at Netflix for about 10 years. So I've been very passionate about filmmaking my whole life. But I've also loved toys my whole life, and really always wanted to express myself in storytelling through action figures, and have collected since I was a kid. And about 10 years ago or so, when Kickstarter sort of became a thing, I realized, like, hey, there might be an opportunity here to actually make my own action figures. And so about 10 years ago, I launched Fresh Monkey Fiction, with a couple of Kickstarters that did good enough to get us funded and get us kind of off the ground. And it sort of went from there. In the last 10 years, we've done lots of different lines. Amazing Heroes, which was a kind of a homage to 80s action figures with characters from public domain comics and a few indie creations. All the way now to doing 6-inch scale stuff with Monster Force and other lines like Naughty or Nice. So definitely working a lot of different form factors over the last 10 years, and it's been a blast.
Now, Fresh Monkey Fiction, did you have, because on the bio I saw something about a Spy Monkey Creations. Was that like your first toy company, or was that a different?
I worked with the guys at Spy Monkey initially, and then moved into doing my own thing with Fresh Monkey.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So I gotta ask, what is your obsession with monkeys?
It's always been a thing. I had some nicknames in college, and this sort of translated into sort of the business part of it, and I just thought it was kind of a fun thing. And then I decided, hey, I'm just going to name my toy company. The one thing people ask is like, what's up with the fiction part of the name? And I think as you start to follow a lot of the lines we do, we build a lot of our own intellectual property and lore and story into a lot of the things that we do. It's really important to me. I grew up as an 80s kid, where you had things like G.I. Joe that had a cartoon and a comic that Larry did, and really kind of immersed yourself in the fiction of all of these things. And that's something that I've taken with me through a lot of the lines that we're working on, where we get to really explore a lot of the characters. And it's not just a cool toy, it's usually a whole world that we're trying to build.
You started out kind of doing, you've been around for about 10 years, and your focus primarily started out with the smaller 4-inch or 1/18 scale, and more recently you've been kind of moving up to the 112 6-inch sized figures. What are the as far as on your end, as far as creating the figures and stuff, what kind of differences do you see between the 4-inch and the 12-inch, and like which do you prefer personally, and how do you kind of balance the two scales as you're kind of growing your library of action figures in your company?
I think that's a great question. Originally our first line with Amazing Heroes was just a 5-point articulated figure because we were trying to get. I didn't want to go into it and do something at with 25 plus points articulation. So we started out very small, and then we worked closely with Zyka Toys around getting into the 4-inch market. I'm a collector. I collect all sorts of scales, right? So that's the thing. Like I've got everything from 5-point articulated figures to 4-inch figures to 6-inch figures on my shelf. So and the ebb and flow. Sometimes I'm really into 4-inch stuff. Sometimes I've been into 6-inch, figures. I try to balance with what the market is asking for and what sort of we want to do, while also trying to dabble in different things. Like, for example, we did some minifigures of cops a few years ago. We also are doing long box heroes with toy author Jason Geyer, who's very superpowers inspired, right? So I like all sorts of form factors, and I don't want to be known as just like, oh, he's just the 4-inch guy, or he's just the this, or he's just the that. It depends on sort of what I feel the line needs, what the market's going to bear to a certain extent. Like you said, there's been a huge transition into the 6-inch or 1/12 market over the last few years, especially. I think a lot with Hasbro moving GI Joe into that scale has continued to see that market shine, and a lot of Kickstarters are moving into that scale too. So that said, especially going to Joe Fest, you realize there's still a lot of collectors at that 4-inch scale, and so we're trying to make sure we do a little bit for everyone.
Now, do you find it's like a hard when you have a line like Operation Monster Force? I think of primarily as a 1/12 scale line, but you do actually do 1/18 scale Operation Monster Force figures as well. So when you have a line that where you're doing both scales, do you find that like when you do a really cool 6-inch figure, then the 4-inch collectors get upset that they're not getting that figure, or like vice versa? Because I see that.
Absolutely.
I see that a lot with like, when Hasbro, when Hasbro got the Marvel Legend license from Toy Biz, and then they switched to the Marvel Universe 3 3/4 inch figures. I mean, it was all out civil war among Marvel, figure collectors about who was getting the more attention and all that. So I'm just curious, is that something you have to struggle with, or do you feel like you're doing a pretty good job of satisfying both sides of that equation?
I was one of those Marvel Legends guys too, just so you know. I was angry. I don't know if you can ever do a great job satisfying everyone, right? I think what we try to do is a nice mix of both, right? Where we don't completely service one scale over another. For example, at Joe Fest, we announced another wave of our Eagle Force figures, and there were some Monster Force characters in there that did not appear, in 6-inch yet. So we're trying to give a little bit to each scale, and knowing that those things will translate back and forth. Like it will be figures we'll do at 4-inch that will go to 6-inch, and figures that will do 6-inch that will go to 4-inch, and try to just balance sort of that, as long as the market supports it, which is, again, we can maybe get into this later a little bit, why we really heavily value that pre-order model, around sort of trying to understand what the market wants before we make a huge investment.
Is there any line where it's like off limits to do like a 6-inch version? Like you mentioned Long Box Heroes, which is a pretty cool line, and definitely is a throwback to like vintage style action figures. But could we ever see those same characters done in 6-inch, more articulated scale, or is that something specific that you can only do that size and that type of articulation?
It just depends on the licensing agreement we have with those creators. Sometimes we'll just license a particular, form factor. Sometimes we'll try to license it for more different sizes. They have deals with other, creators doing also different scales. So, it depends on how that license is sliced and if there's an opportunity to do it. And if we feel like it's something we kind of want to get into as well. So I do think we'll see some of the characters we've done at Longbox move to 6-inch figures from Fresh Monkey, and then also think there's other stuff like Loose Collectors doing some great stuff too with some of these properties at the 6-inch scale. So yeah, I mean, it depends on if the license is available, we might pursue it.
Speaking of like Loose Collector and stuff, that brings me to another question. Like as I've kind of been studying you guys do a lot of collaborative work with outside independent guys, whether it's with the weapons and the accessories, or even collaborating with other creators on figures. I don't know if this is a good analogy or not, but I kind of like see you guys as like the Image Comics of toys, where you're like bringing in individual creators kind of working under the Fresh Monkey Fiction banner, but they're still their own kind of independent thing. Is that kind of how you see it or envision Fresh Monkey
100%.
Fiction?
Yeah, I mean, I like the collaborative process, and I'm a huge fan of what's going on right now with the Indi-Toy thing. I mean, obviously I'm doing that, but there are a bunch of other people who are doing it as well, and I'm friends with a lot of them. And um, I always ask them, "Hey, do you want to collaborate on a thing or something?" Because I think it'd be great for both of us. And even if they're like, "Hey, I don't want to," it doesn't mean I'm not going to support them, and they're not going to support me. So we get a lot of support from a lot of us who are doing this, which I think is great. Like I really like one of the things at Joe Fest, which I thought was great, was there was a lot of the indie toy community was there. And I didn't get much time away from the booth, but in the hour and a half that I did get away, what I did was go to everybody's booth who's making independent toys and talk to them, because I'm excited about what they're doing. Like, I like what I'm doing, but I'm a fan first, right? So my collection on my desk here is not just my stuff. Actually, it's very little of my stuff that's on my desk right now, because I'm a big fan of what's going on with the toy industry right now, especially in the indie space. And if I can find a way to support someone, or even more, just work with them, because I'm a huge fan, like I said, of collaboration, then I'm all for it.
Do you ever worry about like an oversaturation, or do you think the market can sustain everybody? And also, like, do you feel other independent creators kind of reciprocate, or have you seen like an increased competitiveness possibly as the spotlight gets shined more and more on the independent stuff?
I mean, I think it's, like everything, there's like an ebb and flow where I feel like we may lean too far into this way and we'll lean back. I kind of feel like I'd rather us do that and have this huge influx of really great people trying to do really awesome stuff than us not have that, right? Because I think we didn't have that for a long time. You're not seeing the big companies do like these type of IP or independent stuff. They're very focused on licensing, and I understand that model. And again, I'm a collector and I'm a huge fan of that model because I buy a lot of that stuff. But they're not going to get a lot of these things at retail because the Targets, the Walmarts, whatever, are not going to be able to put the shelf space dedicated to a lot of these indie things. So I think it's great that we have sort of this community now of folks like making indie toys. I found, look, when I walked around that floor at Joe Fest, and there were a lot. I mean, you were there. There were a lot of indie toy folks there. I felt very welcomed at every booth I stopped by.
Yeah.
And they knew who I was, and I felt very fortunate that they even knew who I am, or what I do. But I thought it was great that they were there, and we had some great conversations, and I felt very embraced by that community. And so I think there are outliers again in every area of the business. But I felt like at that show, everybody was like, it's really great that everybody's here and there's a outlet for folks to come and see some of this stuff. And Comic-Con's around the corner, and I go there every year. Been going there for 20 years every year, and a lot of these guys can't get into Comic-Con because it's just too expensive. There's just not their entry is too high. So it was really great to have a show like Joe Fest that really like was able to spotlight that. PowerCon last year was another great example of a show that I think was really great that helped to spotlight a lot of these, a lot of the smaller companies.
Well, one thing I've noticed, and this is kind of another change I've noticed in recent years, is like not only are we seeing an expansion of independent toy manufacturers, but we're also seeing a huge expansion in like independent toy shows. Like, you mentioned San Diego, and it used to be all about the big mega, conventions, San Diego Comic Con, New York Comic Con. But now, especially when it comes to like toys, action figures, I'm seeing more and more of these smaller independent shows like a Joe Fest, PowerCon, even like a even smaller show like the Maryland Toy Expo, which is one local to me. I've seen, other companies like the Four Horsemen go to and things like that. So, do you feel like that is something that will continue to grow, and that you'll continue, like, will you start going to more and more of these smaller shows like Joe Fest, or, how do you view that kind of landscape?
I think it's great. Like I'm glad that there are opportunities for folks to go or exhibit at these places that are not going to be the Comic Cons, right? Because especially when they're local, it's easier. Like I'm in Southern California, so sometimes I'll go to shows here because it's just easier for me to drive with stuff in my car than me having to fly and ship things. So I'm glad that that's a thing that exists, and I encourage it. And I would like to figure out how I can support it more. I think the challenge with shows, and I always am impressed with a lot of the indie guys that just they get on the show circuit and go, because it's a lot to go to a show and set up, and when you're also managing lines and production, it's very distracting to have the shows you have to kind of manage, right? And that's not a negative thing. It's just everybody has, especially the indie guys like myself, we have limited amount of bandwidth, right? And we're not a huge company. Some of us don't even have really employees, so it's we're taking all that on ourselves. So I'm very impressed when the indie guys can come out to the shows and do stuff, and I would like to do more of that if I can. But it really is just a question of can I actually do it while also managing the stuff that I'm working on.
Now, you mentioned before like licenses, and like you made a mention about Walmart and Target. So I wanted to ask you, do you obviously, the big one of your big announcements out of Joe Fest was that you're going to be doing figures based on the late '80s animated series Cops, which you've also done many figures of before as well. But that's kind of like you're starting to get into that license area. So do you foresee doing more of that? And then also, I do see some smaller companies like a Super 7 and stuff as they try and get a foothold in places like Walmart and Target. Is that something you envision Fresh Monkey Fiction one day will try and do? Or do you think you'll just stick completely with like, the online direct to consumer, or through like a big bad toy store stuff? Do you ever envision trying to get like your products on the shelves of a Walmart and Target, or do you even think that's like kind of maybe an outdated model, or becoming an outdated model when it comes to something like action figures?
Well, a lot of questions to unpack. Let's see. I'll start with the licensing thing. Yeah, I did some early in our Amazing Heroes line. We did some early licensing with Captain Action and Madman, and Long Box Heroes is pretty much all licensed. So I will continue to, I think, do some licensed things where it makes sense, and I am more passionate about the particular line. I don't think I'll do licensing for licensing's sake. I think I'd have to really want to do certain figures. I mean, Longbox is a great example. Like, I'm a huge comic book nerd, and was very fortunate to get to know a lot of those creators personally, and open some doors to doing some of the figures. And that was those are passion projects for myself and Jason, because we just love comics. So yeah, I'll probably do some licensing stuff moving forward, but I want to focus a lot on developing, my own intellectual properties and expanding things like Monster Force and those type of lines, because that's really where, as I talked about earlier, the fiction part comes in, and that's where I can again work with great collaborators. Sean Work, who writes all of our Monster Force fiction, came up with a lot of the concepts, right? Like, that's the stuff that I really enjoy doing because it's very collaborative, and I feel also you're bringing something to an audience that doesn't exist already, right? And that's also the fun part, like trying to find your audience for things that are new, that aren't the 15th version of Batman. And again, I love Batman, but or you should see my Captain America shelf. I got a lot of Captain America on that shelf. So I love that stuff too. But I also think that there's an audience out there for something new and different that maybe the bigger companies aren't going to do. And on to your sort of other question around like mass retail. I think there's certain lines that we do, like Naughty or Nice, that I think make sense potentially for mass. But other things, I don't know if they do well in mass market. And look, we've been pretty much going exclusive through Big Bad Toy Store for a couple of years now, and it's worked out really well. They're immensely supportive to everything that we do. Helped us get a much wider market reach than we could have done ourselves, and are big in supporting not only ourselves but wanting to support like other indie toy companies as well. So for right now, I feel it's a good model at the moment that's working and is allowing me to do the things that I need to do and getting in touch with the audience that I know is out there in the community that already is aware of the places that we're selling through.
Speaking of Big Bad Toy Store, one of your big lines that you're doing in conjunction with Big Bad Toy Store is Operation Monster Force, which seems to have gotten a tremendous amount of positive public feedback, at least from what I've seen. You guys had the exclusives at Joe Fest, which seems to have sold out pretty well, or at least sold pretty well. I know Big Bad got some more in yesterday for pre-order. I'm not sure if they're still available or not, but it seemed like you guys were selling through those pretty good. So maybe just talk about like what is the difference as far as Operation Monster Force and your other lines, and how you're working with Big Bad Toy Store with that particular line.
Yeah, on the Operation Monster Force side, as I said, Big Bad Toy Store and I have been working together for a few years, and it's been a great partnership. And they were interested in, hey, we want to kind of help and maybe do our own kind of line and work with you on a line. And I said, hey, I've got this Monster Force thing. What do you think? And so that's sort of how that started. The difference between Monster Force and most of the lines that I do are heavily, you leverage a pre-order model to see. It's kind of like a pseudo Kickstarter model where we'll put it on Big Bad Toy Store with the caveat of like, hey, we need to reach a certain minimum amount before we're going to push this into production. Monster Force was the exception of that, where they said, hey, look, we'll go ahead and we'll be your partner in this line, and we, regardless of the orders, we're committed and we want to make it. So that line is a little different from some of the other lines that I do. And if you're not paying real close attention to the stuff that I do, you may not realize that those things are different in that way.
You spoke of pre-orders, and I know you're a pretty big fan of the pre-order model, in large part just because it allows you to see if there's enough demand for the product to move forward with it, but it also allows you to get feedback from the consumers. So it, not always necessarily, but sometimes you can make changes based on that feedback before the line actually, goes into production and gets released. The final version gets released to the consumer. But some pushback on the pre-order often is just the delay between, when you announce it and we see it, and then when we actually get it in hand. So like, how are you trying to balance that so you can keep doing the pre-order, but it's not like, 3, 4, 5 years from now before the consumer actually gets the figure in hand?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting model, right? It's one that, if you look at the Kickstarter model, all the Kickstarter models are, for the most part, using that model, right? Where you're going to go in and you're going to support a thing, and you're going to get it in anywhere from 18 to 24 months. And if someone's doing a great Kickstarter, they'll take you along for the journey, right? That's one of the things I loved about Kickstarter. And even though I'm able to now kind of work with Big Bad on some things, I didn't want to lose sort of that connection to the consumer. So like you said, the pre-order lets us understand, is there a market for what we want to do? A lot of the things we do have found an audience through pre-order, and we've moved them into production. One of our lines, we have Naughty or Nice, which was primarily a Christmas line. Arlen, who is the designer and creator of that line, decided, hey, we should do something for Halloween. So we tried doing something for Halloween last year, and we didn't get enough pre-orders to make it happen. And as sad as we were, as wanting to bring something that we thought was awesome in the world, it didn't find its footing, and that's okay. And that was, I would have rather that happen than us made a bunch of stuff that nobody wanted. So that's a little bit about the pre-order model and why we do it.
Now, like you spoke of the Halloween stuff and Naughty or Nice. So Naughty or Nice is a very interesting line, and again is another line that seems to have garnered a lot of fandom around it. And not only that, but I've seen a number of other companies start to do more of the holiday themed stuff more and more as well. Even like larger companies like Hasbro and stuff with Star Wars and things. But like, why do you think like the Halloween stuff? Like, I love Halloween. It's one of my favorite holidays. And I know, like, I think I heard Joel at Joe Fest saying he wanted to see an Easter Bunny figure for the Naughty or Nice line. Like, how do you like? Do you think because of the failure of the Halloween figures, you're going to have to keep it to Christmas, or do you think there's a potential to expand it out to other holidays?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
there's a huge potential. I even think for Halloween, there's a potential. We just maybe it didn't find the flavor that people wanted, and that's okay, right? Like, there's nothing wrong with that, and that's why I appreciate the fan feedback, because that's why we do it, right? We're making these things for us first, but obviously, we're making them for everybody else too, and we want to know what they think. The great thing about, I think the great thing about these holiday themed lines, and I find myself doing this as a collector, right? I have my huge collection. But for the holiday stuff, I just kind of bring it out for the holiday and then I put it back away. So it's sort of this weird, like, excuse to bring out extra toys, which is kind of weird. But like, I think that's also why you're seeing this trend with Hasbro and other companies, because I think collectors have realized, like, oh, this is a collection I don't need out all year, but it's one that when the holiday comes
It's
around, I want to bring it out and express myself through that, which I think is really fun.
yeah, it's your holiday decorations, just like
100%.
the Christmas tree and everything. And I mean, you see that with like, I mean, Hallmark does the keepsake ornaments. I think that's
Yeah.
really kind of my first exposure of the pop culture merging with the holiday type thing. So yeah, definitely. I feel like, and I was even going to ask, like, do you see a surge in sales for like the Santa Claus figures as we get closer to Christmas as opposed to other times of the year
Yeah,
type
yeah.
thing?
I can't move any Naughty or Nice figures in February. Like, Christmas has happened, everyone's over it, right? And as you start to get into fall, you start seeing a spike of like, oh, okay, I didn't buy these before, or I had them and I wanted to buy some extras because I'm going to get my, like you said, like, it's my holiday decorations coming out. So what do I want to add to it this year? In the same way, like you mentioned, you're going to go buy a Hallmark ornament or a Nutcracker collection, or any of those holiday type things. So yeah, we definitely see more of a spike as we get into the fall, especially with the Christmas stuff. If we move into other holidays, will we see that? I don't know. It's going to be an experiment, so we'll see. Like, Joel mentioned to me at Joe Fest as well. He's like, it'd be great to do some sort of
He
Easter.
really want he
So
really wants that bunny rabbit.
yeah, so I'm like, all right, maybe we'll, Arlen and I are talking about that. We met yesterday on it, so we'll see. And Arlen, this is his baby. Like, this is, it's his line. It comes from him. When we had the panel at Joe Fest, I asked him to come up and talk about it, because it's, this is his passion line. And I'm very fortunate that I get to even be a part of it and maybe guide it in a little bit of a direction. So he's got a lot of exciting things planned. And like at Joe Fest, we announced the sleigh and those kind of things. So the line's going to continue for sure.
So I was going to bring that up. So you did announce the sleigh. When might we get a look at the sleigh? And I gotta, is this going to be just a sleigh, or is it going to be decked out in weapons, and is it like a militarized Santa sleigh, or
The
give
sleigh
us any details?
the sleigh will be modular, so that we can do other versions of the sleigh if we want to. I think we'll probably have some stuff we'll look at. You can see early fall, and as we get to, orders, probably around maybe late October, November. We usually launch the Naughty or Nice stuff towards the Christmas holiday for hopefully delivery the next year, or subsequently after that, because sometimes things take longer than the 12 months. But we usually kind of do the campaigns around the fall. So we'll probably start looking at some teases of it like toward later this summer. but yeah, the sleigh will hopefully it's going to work obviously with the reindeers that we offered last year. And then will be modular, so we can start to add different things to it if we want to in the future. As a good example, Sergeant Santa was one of our popular Santas, and so yeah, it'd be fun to maybe do something where we could add some kind of components to the sleigh as well.
Now, for those who maybe like missed out on the sleigh or missed out on the reindeer, or we're like, why do I need reindeer unless there's going to be a sleigh or something, like, will they get another opportunity at the reindeer, or are those still available?
They're still available for pre-order now. So, like anything, if now that you know a sleigh is coming, and again, the sleigh is going to be in a situation where will we get enough pre-orders to make it, kind of thing. So, I always want to caveat with that. These things that we're talking about doing, a lot of the things we announced at Joe Fest 2 are things that we intend to make and want to make, but really need to know that the audience is going to support it. And the great thing about the Big Bad Toy Store model currently is that there's not really you're not committing any cash up front, really. It's just really like a commitment for a pre-order to let us gauge the market. And over that time of those pre-orders, we see a lot of folks that like either come in late, but the pre-order is open, or they'll cancel their pre-orders. And so, the pre-order thing is really sort of important for allowing us to understand, like, is there going to be a market for something?
Cops, central organization of police specialists, fighting crime in a future time, protecting Empire City from Big Boss and his gang of crooks.
Now, going back to cops, I know probably not much more you can share with us on that line other than what you told us at Joe Fest, but just to reiterate for anyone who maybe missed that news. So you guys are doing starting with Bulletproof, the main character from the original series. Now, if I remember correctly, Hasbro was the one that made toys originally back in the 80s, right? That was originally a Hasbro line, right?
Yeah. It was licensed by Hasbro initially. Yeah.
Now, is this like where you're kind of, I know obviously you're not going to decide fully if you're going to move forward with more figures until you see how that first one sells, but is this something you kind of envision as taking off and maybe even expanding it to vehicles or anything like that? Or do you primarily just see it maybe a couple of figures that, you do one figure a year type thing?
Oh, no. I mean, I think, right now it's not envisioned as a full 6-character line right away. But we already kind of working on the second character right now. So we plan on definitely going, and we'll see what the appetite is on the line. We got a really good reception at Joe Fest, which is fantastic. So we definitely think that folks are interested in it. But we see it as a line that we want to keep making figures from, and we'll go as deep as folks will support. I think that's like anything, right? So yeah, I think right now we're going to rotate from a hero and then a villain, and then a hero and a villain, and kind of see where that goes. And if we get a lot more support, maybe we'll offer a couple figures at once, and then get into things like vehicles or those type of things as well, if we're seeing like a big support to that line. Not to get too into the weeds or into kind of the creative or the business side of it, but if you've been following our lines, you see that we do a fair amount of parts reuse across our lines. Santa Claus is, got that. Monster Force has that. Eagle Force has that. When we get to something like Cops, it's all original sculpts that don't have a lot of reuse across them. So that line is probably going to see things like a little bit higher price point. So I'm just letting folks know now to get ready. Like, it's not, so those are the kind of things that factor into what we do. It's not that we're like trying to gouge people out of like money. It's like when we get into things that are more unique sculpts, things that we can't use later or amortize over the course of a line, we have to like look at like what that looks like from a business side of things too. So I know a lot of these interviews, we don't get into like those kind of specifics, but I do like to highlight them sometimes too, because there's a reason behind the things that we do and why we do them. And that's why I think coming on and talking about stuff today also, I think, helps folks understand like the motivations behind some of the things that we're doing.
Well, I would also assume like you basically, Monster Force is your own thing, so you're not like paying things like a licensing fee, right. Whereas Cops, you're paying somebody the privilege to be able to make those figure. So I mean, that's just another added expense that can,
Yeah.
unfortunately has to get factored in.
Anytime you get into licensing, there's licensing fees, there's royalty. I mean, like Long Box Heroes, that again, it was awesome, and I'm glad we got to do that. And we're going to continue with that line, but that's a factor you have to build into, your budgets and those kind of things. So, and those are very real things, and they translate to, the cost of doing stuff. And when you're not mass retail, right, when you're not making hundreds of thousands of product, unfortunately, it does come down to the consumer, and does the consumer really want to support it at a particular, form factor, particular cost? All those things are part of it.
And one thing I often hear about with smaller independent guys is like the struggles of dealing with the factories. And like, obviously, you don't get the same kind of treatment that a larger company is ordering a lot more product and stuff. So are you guys pretty set with your factory? Like, or does that continue to be an issue for, as a smaller toy company?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly struggled with our initial factory when we did our Ego Force line. I think folks who have stuck with us through the line have seen the quality improve from the original Kickstarter to now. And so we're very thankful for all the customers that have continued to support the line. Right now, we've been working with this current factory for a few years, and they are producing great quality. So I don't see that shifting. I think there is, even with the factory we're at, there always can be challenges. I think that the more folks that are producing indie toys, a lot of us go to similar factories because we all know each other, and a lot of, like we got to earlier in the interview, like we do see a lot of support within the indie community. So that puts more pressure on the factories to either expand or get things through faster. So even though we're with the factory that we love, we still encounter some factory issues as well, and that's with a pretty stable factory that we've used for a few years. So it's a little bit more of a struggle, I think, for the indie toy folks than it's going to be for like the Hasbros or the Mattels. And some of these other companies, they essentially own the factory, even though they don't own the factory, because they're pushing that factory's doing 90% of their work is through like a Hasbro or a Mattel, right? A lot of the smaller guys, we can't afford or don't have the resources to put boots on the ground all the time with everything, right? So it's more challenging there. And even when the big factories do that and big companies do that as well, like they hit issues. I mean, Brian Flynn from Super 7, he's done some great interviews around like the actual production of toys and all that. And he's gone through some of that too, even at the scale that he's doing it. So it's a thing, it's a real thing. And it's part of the reason why these things take a long time.
All right. I'm going to pull up a screen just so you can see. I thought I'd give you an opportunity to talk about some of the new figures you showed off.
Oh, great.
Let's start with your Soldier of Fortune line. So that was a new line that you announced. That was a new line you announced at Joe Fest, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So these have not yet gone up for pre-order.
Yeah. So we debuted some new stuff at Joe Fest. Some of the stuff you'll see images have like the little yellow under development near, which is things that are early for us. And again, getting back to one of the things we talked about, which is kind of getting stuff out early, getting some feedback, really like bringing in the community is a big thing that we are trying to do versus like, hey, here's a line, here's a toy, just go buy it, right? We like to show things and get feedback. We're pretty active on a few of our social media channels like Instagram and Facebook to kind of get that feedback. So Soldiers of Fortune was a line that we announced at Joe Fest. And that line is very much targeted towards customizers and army builders, right? It's a little more generic than the things that we normally do. But you'll see things like in there, like, Secret Service agents in suits, and you'll see things like, close combat operatives that are more for building armies of things and different colorways and those kind of things. So we're excited about that because I think it's something that we're not seeing out of the bigger companies. And we thought like, hey, I think there's a market for these type of things with customers who are into, again, photography, setting up army building, that kind of thing. And we want to kind of, send stuff to the market that has those kind of features.
Now, is Soldier of Fortune, it's completely separate thing, or is there some connection with Operation Monster Force? Like, I know you have the Crimson Moon figures that did recently go up for pre-order at Big Bad Toy Store, which is, as I understand it, kind of a precursor for
Yeah,
Monster Force.
people. Yeah.
But is Soldier
Yeah.
of Fortune, is that like have any connection, or is that just a completely separate line?
No, this is a line that we won't be doing any fiction for or anything for outside of kind of what you're seeing, here. And we will do probably you'll see a lot of repaints. This figure is a good example where you have the agent and the spy. You have one in a white tuxedo or black tuxedo. Close combat operatives. You see some in camo. You'll see some in different decos. So that's what you're going to see out of this line. There's not really going to be too much story elements involved. You may have things like good guys and bad guys, but that'll probably be as far as it goes, which is kind of atypical for what we do. But we thought like, hey, I think there's a market for these type of things that we can do with either assets that we have or create some new assets and get it out there for folks who want to have these things in their collection.
Now, even though, like on your end, you're not connecting the dots, these figures will scale with the Operation Monster Force. So if you just wanted some generic army guys to fight your Monster Force guys,
yeah, or build your own mythology around it too, right? Like that's the thing too. Like that's why there's a lot of customizability here. Well, you'll have like accessory sets, you'll have head packs. You can change ethnicities on characters between different skin tones and those kind of things. So, there's all that possibility for you as, someone who wants to start to create their own fiction around some of this and use these kind of things to do that. And we see that a lot with customizers with our Eagle Force line. Our Eagle Force line has been going strong, now for, last 5+ years. And we'll see a lot of folks that come by and just customize stuff. At Joe Fest, Seth Green was there making some rounds with the booths, and he came by and talked, and he showed me his Eagle Force collection, which was he just pulled out his phone and showed me like all these images of all these Eagle Force figures that he has customized, right? Which is really great, right? And we saw that with a lot of fans that came by. So we're really targeting that for the 6-inch market with this line.
And then this is your first female figures for Operation Monster Force, right? So you're getting the first looks at those.
One of the biggest requests we've had in Monster Force is, hey, can we start to bring some female characters into the line? And Sean, again, who's the co-writer and helping develop the line, has had a lot of ideas for female characters, and I kind of have been like, we're not ready yet. So, but now we're ready to kind of start showing this stuff. So a lot of these things are built into the mythology here. We showed Red Riding Hood and Agent Harker, and there'll be more female figures as well. There'll be some female vampires also coming in. So yeah, definitely excited about adding some more females to the line. We have a lot of plans for this as we get into next year.
These are double jointed elbows.
Yeah. So you'll see. I mean, these are just again quick concept developments. You'll see a lot of the same articulation that will happen in the current Monster Force figures with the female figures as well, like butterfly shoulders, double joints. Yeah, these are pure just like concept developments for the figures. I even think some of the designs will change a little bit from what you see here as we kind of start to, get these lines more into sort of a real place.
I don't know if you're far enough along in the development of these to even really know this answer, but like some of the issues I see with like Marvel Legends and the female figures would be like, because the joints tend to be thinner, so they're a little more rubberized and they tend not to hold the weight of the figure. Is that something you're kind of cognitive of as you head into female figures?
100%. I think the female figures are challenging, right? Because of that, right? They're usually a little thinner in areas and other things. And so as we look to develop these, we want to make sure that they're going to function in the same way that we're developing the other figures with. So again, we're going to take our time on this and make sure we do it right. You'll see we started introducing things like soft goods in season 2 as well. So you'll start to see things like soft goods introduced in the female figures as well.
Now, one of the things I noticed is like you, instead of calling them waves, you're calling them seasons. Like it's like a TV series.
Yeah. And that's on purpose because all of it's based on the mythology and the story that we're telling every time we launch a line. So once the lines come out, you'll see that the mythology and the story will continue to evolve as each season comes out. And that'll be through either, stuff we'll publish online, like some fiction, or every character. We had an opportunity to showcase the packaging at Joe Fest as well. And so when you open the packaging, there's a comic page on each of the packaging that kind of goes into the character and the story. So it will evolve just like a TV show evolves, essentially, is sort of how we position this line.
Now, the comics on the packaging, are they essentially standoffs, or like if you get all the figures in the season, it kind of creates a overall comic book story, or are they done more as just kind of like a bio for the particular character?
They're a bio for the particular character, but also there's larger story elements that connect them as you're reading them. So you don't have to read them sequentially, but as you read them, you understand like, oh, this is how the story starts. This is how this character fits in.
Now, you mentioned, I believe, at Joe Fest about a comic book, an actual comic book, where you were looking to do a Kickstarter for.
Yeah, but that's for Eagle Force. So we're going to do, with Eagle Force, we're going to try Kickstarter to do a World of Eagle Force. I think we're going to do a magazine, but part of that in that magazine is going to have a 10-page comic. They'll have bios, we'll have photography in there, we'll have a bunch of other stuff. So we want to move to this model where we have these quarterly magazines that have everything from interviews with creators to comic book stories in there to bios on the characters to really, again, help to flesh out the worlds that we're building. I think one of the things that we've heard from Monster Force, especially from fans, even though the line's not been released yet outside of the exclusives, is a lot of the world building and the story. So we want to like look at how we can bring that to the fans as well. And I think comic books are kind of an easy way to do that. I don't know if we'll do a full comic book series, but we'll do things like having these volumes of the worlds that we're building that go into the various characters and the storylines that are evolving.
Now, for those on Operation Monster Force that might not be up to date on the actual backstory of it, so as I understand it, your main bad guy is the Forgotten King, and then you've got the Helsing character who's basically been hired to hunt the Forgotten King, and then he's enlisted the aid of Dracula.
Right. Essentially, he unleashes Dracula from the Van Helsing tomb, where he's been imprisoned because he needs to. He can't combat the Forgotten King by himself, so he basically goes with the only option he has, which is to release one of his enemies to help him combat a larger enemy. So there's conflicts there between those characters, as well as they're also trying to figure out what's happening with the Forgotten King. And as the Forgotten King is building his armies of, the undead, as he raises folks from the undead. And also he's got other, folks on that side that are helping with his agenda as well. As you can see here, the characters. Yeah.
Now, is there like, taking like G.I. Joe, you know who's the bad guys are, because usually they've got like a big cobra symbol on them somewhere or something. Like, is there something that differentiates which characters on which side, or is that just something like you have to learn?
Yeah, there's not really a G.I. Joe and a cobra symbol on each of the characters to kind of give you a visual clue where they come from. But when we launch the figures for pre-order, they'll all be launched with like bios and things that you can read, when the figures actually, are available. So you understand, like, Mr. Legacy, as an example, is one of our hero characters, which ties into our Midnight Men comic book that we did a few years ago. It's available for digital download on our website, right? So there's a lot of, again, these things will start to interweave with the various lines. You'll see connection points, like you're seeing with our Eagle Force line, where you'll see connection points between the various factions within Eagle Force and how they're connected. And you'll see that within Monster Force as well, in the same way that we had, Crimson Moon is kind of this prequel story to Monster Force as well. So you'll see, as you start to get into the fiction and the lore, you'll start to see these things and how they connect.
You talked at Joe Fest, like you've got season 1 of Operation Monster Force is supposed to start shipping out to folks who pre-ordered it in August, right?
Yep, that's the plan. And
then season 2 is currently available for pre-order, but we won't see those until. Do you have a tentative?
Yeah, we're targeting end of Q1, Q2 for next year. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So basically, kind of early next year is when
Yeah.
season. Okay.
Yeah.
And then you're not going to open pre-orders for season 3 until season 1 ships out.
Yeah. Yep. Till season 1 comes out. Yeah.
And then we're starting to see early concepts for season 4, but I'm assuming that wouldn't go up for pre-order until after season 2 is shipped out to people. Is that kind of how you're?
Yeah, or at least close to, I think. I mean, right now, especially, we decided to offer 2 seasons before the first one came out, so we could kind of gauge the audience and start getting things into production because things take so long, right? So you'll kind of see ebbs and flows of, hey, this is releasing, this is out, this is going up for pre-order. We'll start putting things on the website too in terms of when you can expect things to drop and so forth as well. And so people we try to post online a lot, but like we'll put something together so you can say, oh, this is in production now, it's expected this date or that date. But on average, most of these things are going to take anywhere from 18 to 24 months. Some things might be a little sooner if we can. Soldiers of Fortune might be a little faster because we're leveraging a lot of pre-existing, parts that we have already. So those things might move a little faster than other things.
Now, during Joe Fest, you did put up for pre-order the Deluxe Kiloworg figure at Big Bad Toys store.
Yeah. We launched that in our panel, which was kind of fun during the panel.
So will that kind of see release probably around when season 2 starts to see release?
This one actually, because we're partnering with Maestro Union, and getting back to, again, we like to do collaborations, and we were a huge fan of this figure and what they're doing, and we reached out to them and said, hey, we've got this Monster Force line. Would you guys like to do a variant that kind of can go with that line? And they were very open to that, and they were like, hey, we could do some new parts and other things. So that was pretty great. And so that's actually in production now. And we'll probably, the goal is to get that landed in Q4 of this year. So, but we're super excited about it. And I love that. I just love the design, and I thought it made a lot of sense to incorporate that into the line, and they were willing to do it. So we're super excited.
Now with the Kiloworg figure, the Deluxe one's the one that went out for pre-order during Joe Fest, but there will be a regular non-Deluxe version, as I understand it, that will be available at some point in the line as well, right?
Yeah, potentially. We're looking to have, if we can do a non-Deluxe version as well.
Maybe
will just be more of just the basic werewolf without all the weapons and the gear and the whole thing.
Another figure that recently went up for pre-order was this Urban Operation Trooper. So this is part of season 1.
Yep.
This character. Okay.
Yeah. So we now that we're in production, we got production samples of season 1, and so we had we did some production photography of the figures because most of the stuff that we offer is usually digital renders, and that's how we did it with the season 1. So now that we have these in hand, we got some production photography done to give folks an understanding, like, here's what the figure is actually going to look like. And we try to improve. We try to improve from the renders, and the goal is to make these things look better than the renders. That's the goal, or include some extra accessories, little Easter eggs. For example, with the Delta Red figures, there's a plate carrier that all the figures wear with their harnesses and gear, and we included some extras that we didn't solicit in the figures, right? So we try to do that as well. We always try to. The goal is to make these figures better than, because we solicit them so early. The goal is to get that feedback and make the figures better than the actual solicitation images. And I think that's some of the feedback we've gotten with some of the images that we've released so far. And hopefully, once the figures are in people's hand beyond the exclusives, we'll get that same feedback.
Now, another thing that's kind of interesting with the Monster Force line is you have a lot of fantasy elements, but then you also have incorporated a lot of like realistic military aspects to it as well. So you're kind of combining a military type line with the fantasy. So like with this figure, this guy's using a lot of like, real type weapons. And that kind of comes back to the collaboration part, because an outside company for the weapons, right?
Yeah, starting with season 2, we started working with Gridiron Studios, who, again, was making some amazing product. And I was a huge fan of what they were doing. So I reached out and said, hey, you know more about weapons than I do. Would you like to collaborate? And they were like, oh my gosh, we'd love to do it. So it goes back to that collaboration thing where I love collaboration. Like, it's one of the things I enjoy most about making toys, whether that's with Arlen from the Santa line or Toy Otter from Long Box Heroes. It's something that I just love as part of the process. I don't want it to be just me in a room. And so Gridiron was like, hey, we can come in and help starting to design some stuff for season 2. So they've been great.
Now, are you working with them with the Soldier of Fortune stuff as well, or?
Yep. So they may not do everything, but yeah, they're doing some stuff as well. And they'll continue, I think, as we grow out our lines to provide the designs and the models for the weapons. And that led to us doing the Commander Gridiron figure as well, which was really fun. Like, we built into the mythology that Gridiron was doing the weapons, and so we brought Commander Gridiron in as actually the weapon supplier for the actual line, which I thought was really fun. So they're actually making the weapons, and they're actually now within the lore actually as part of the line, which I thought was great.
So he's kind of the Destro of Monster.
He's kind of that. Like, he's he's not necessarily a good guy, but he's not necessarily a bad guy either. So and as again, the bio will come out for Commander Gridiron there, and Mark, who heads up Gridiron, is just a really great guy, and so we kind of collaborated on what that figure would look like, and the helmet and the designs and stuff. And they're also going to do some. They've been really great at doing like these third-party add-on kits for G.I. Joe Classified and other lines as well, and they're going to kind of do that for Monster Force 2, which I think will help folks like build out their collection in ways that we're not going to be able to get to as quick with all the stuff that we're doing. So I'm really excited about that collaboration for sure.
Now we're seeing, like, with these season 3 figures, like the Fog and Goblin, some ninja aspects as well. Is that something we might be seeing more of, is like ninja type characters in this line? Or
yeah, I mean, I think 13 Ghosts, the story behind that is that there are essentially these 13 warriors that are essentially, they have these various masks that possess each individual, and then that individual gets possessed, and then the powers of, or the actions of that ghost then are come equipped with that character now. So we'll see like 13 of those across the line, and they'll all be ninja-esque type of characters. Some will be more traditional, some will be maybe in a suit. You will just see, right? So that gives us a lot of room to play with those 13 characters. So we're really excited about that.
now, jumping back into the foreign stuff with Eagle Force.
Yeah, so the World of Eagle Force line has a bunch of different sublines in it that are all interconnected. All of those sublines are basically different genres. Voyagers is very sci-fi centric. Star Commanders is very space centric. Blade Cuts Both Ways is very much like action buddy comedy. Monster Force in this scale is the same as it is in 6-inch. Liberty Legion is more of a superhero take in that world, right? Eagle Force Returns is very much more military. So all these things exist in the same world, and there's different subgenres within the lines. And so as we continue to do more of World of Eagle Force, you'll see characters from each of these sublines show up. And that way, there may, if you're a fan of everything we do, that's great, but you might just be a fan of, hey, Blade Cuts Both Ways or Star Commanders, and you may pick up one or two characters here. A lot of things that we do too, especially with the Eagle Force line, is include extra accessories and heads for folks who do want to like customize and build that out. So we'll continue to see that in that line as well.
Now, I wanted to go back briefly and touch upon, we talked a little bit about Crimson Moon, which is 100% a precursor for Monster Force, right? It's like kind of the origin stories of a lot of these characters.
There's a few things are tied in. Yeah.
So wave 1 of that is available for pre-order now at Big Bad Toy Store. And wave 1 basically consists of bad guys, right?
Yeah, so wave 1 is pretty much all bad guys. So during Joe Fest, we also announced in development of what wave 2 would be, which is primarily good guys. And that's where you see things like Adrian Van Helsing, who is Declan's father. So again, you'll start to see out the fiction in terms of some of this stuff. And this line is it's very much centered in 1970s horror. Like the timeline for the line takes place in the 70s. So it's very much a homage to 1970s like horror films and those kind of things. So that's what we'll see out of this line. And then the second, like I said, the second wave is more of the heroes that fit into sort of the line as well.
So as actual as the story goes, Crimson Moon is kind of based in the 70s, and
Yep.
then Monster Force is based in modern day, essentially.
Present day, yeah.
Now you had mentioned like getting feedback and a lot from fans. Where is the best? Like if somebody wants to go and give you feedback on any of your action figure lines, where's the best place for them to go do that?
Yeah, so Instagram's a great place when we do posts. Please chime in and make comments. Facebook as well. We also have a Facebook group, Fresh Monkey Fiction fans group on Facebook, where I'll sometimes post early looks at things there that I'm not posting on our main socials yet, because it's kind of a private group, but most everybody's welcome to join. And those are great places to kind of offer up suggestions or thoughts. I would say probably don't email me. That's probably not, because I just get a lot of stuff going on. But I do try to spend time daily on social media so that I'm responding to folks that have questions, or at least looking at what folks have to say in terms of, hey, this is great. We're open to a lot of constructive feedback is what I would say. Like I encourage, hey, this is an awesome thing, but could we get this? Or have you thought about making this? Or not that we're looking for ideas, but if you see something in the figure that you're like, oh, hey, have you thought about including that? Or maybe we could do this with it or something in the future. Those are things that we encourage folks to kind of say, because we're listening and want to understand that. And we have an opportunity to potentially change some things along the way. Here's a great example. The Dracula figure and the Forgotten King figure didn't initially have butterfly joints in the design. And halfway through production, we got a lot of feedback of people realizing that, hey, it'd be great if those things had that. And now they have butterfly joints, right? So like those are things that we changed along the way that weren't part of the initial thing that we were going to do. Drop down hips is another example where we weren't planning on doing drop down hips. And then we heard from folks that I think that would be kind of great. So we incorporated that into.
And even like testing the waters of AI art, and you seem to change course on that too.
I'll talk about that real quick too. We look, I come from a technology background, like we mentioned earlier. My background's in visual effects, so I'm always in the loop on whatever's going on with technology. So I've been leaning very much into AI on that side of the thing for a long time. And AI is not a new thing. People think it's like, oh my God, AI isn't. And we've been doing, machine learning and other things for a long time. Crowd replacements on, movies and all these things, right? So these are all things that have been sort of in my wheelhouse for a long time. So we started playing around with AI, with art and the whole thing, and really kind of liked the way it was looking and that kind of thing. And we incorporated that into some packaging. And again, these things take a long time. So they were sitting at the factory and they were kind of already done. And, then we started to get some feedback on AI and learn more about the different types of things that was going on with Midjourney and those kind of things. And, we've kind of like listened and said, hey, we're not going to lean into AI kind of moving forward for packaging design. And, it wasn't really a cost thing. It was more just like we like to experiment with technology thing. I mean, that's really what most of it was. Now hearing from folks that like, hey, they're concerned around what AI means for the community and the art community. We're like, hey, we're going to pull back on that and do other things. And so that, again, it's, we listen and want to hear that feedback. And, like sometimes you're stepping in the wrong direction and you want to, you want to hear if we're going in the right place. So I appreciated all the feedback and the conversation around it and led us to where we're at now. So, so I think this is part of what we're doing. Like we're trying to get, as much as I love toys, sometimes I get frustrated with hey, here's the thing we made, now go buy it. I'm like, oh man, I wish it had like, I don't know, a little minor paint adjustment, or maybe the scale would have been different or something like that. Right. And now, we can listen to that and maybe change some things along the way. And there's the frustrating part of this may not be in your hands for 18 to 24 months. But I think it's, hopefully if we're doing it right, people feel like they're part of the journey. And that was one of the things that the Kickstarter thing was great. And I think folks who are still using that platform, and why we're going back to it for some things like the comic, is because there's a awesome community building there. There's conversations that happen around it that just aren't happening with mainstream toys right now. And so again, we're going to continue to kind of lean into that.
Well, we've covered a lot today. Was there anything else that you specifically wanted to plug or announce? I know we've got San Diego Comic-Con coming up, and I believe you're going to be on a couple of panels at Comic-Con that weekend.
Yeah.
So
yeah, if you're going to Comic-Con, I'll be on 2 panels. Both of them will be on Saturday. One is Indi-Toy panel, and then one is a panel on licensing. So they're Saturday afternoon. So please feel free to come by those. And if you do go, please stop me after and say hello. That would be great. If you want to start engaging with some of the stuff we're doing, please follow us on social media and make comments. If you have questions, please ask them, and we'll try to answer them as best we can. And man, I just want to thank you for having me on to talk about this stuff. It's been a great time to chat, and thanks again for coming by the booth at Joe Fest, and also streaming the panel, which was, even though you couldn't hear it because of some technical issues in the room, it was not our fault or your fault. It was great to have, folks there who couldn't be there kind of see what was going on.
yeah. I mean, I'm looking forward to Operation Monster Force. It looks like a lot of potential there. So I'm really excited to see what you guys have in store for us down the road.
Yeah, and I can't wait to get the figures in people's hands, and see some reviews of what people think. That would be great.
Okay, so there you have it, straight from the horse's mouth. Sounds like a lot of exciting things coming from Fresh Monkey Fiction. Now, of course, I'd love to hear your own thoughts about everything we talked about down in the comments section below. If you're new to this channel, please think about subscribing and hitting that bell notification so you're alerted every time I upload a new video. You can also hit that like button. It does help with the algorithm. As always, guys, stay safe out there, and until next time, I'll catch you later. Thanks for watching today's video. Now, if you're new to the channel, please think about hitting that subscribe button. Also hit the bell notification so you're alerted every time I upload a new video. For all the latest action figure news, be sure to head over to toynewseye.com, marvelousnews.com, jediinsider.com, and tformers.com. And remember, action figures are great,